Well, good evening, everybody. This is Joe Van Cleve. I'm in the North Valley of Albuquerque. We're at Bookworks Bookstore, and we're doing a typewriter event in conjunction with Waz Flint and the book reading from her new book, The Distraction-Free First Draft. Stay tuned.
Well, first of all, thank you all so much for being here to support my book tonight. And I want to thank Bookworks for hosting me. This is my first author event. So if I'm turning a little red, it's just 'cause I'm a little bit nervous. Taking some deep breaths. But I wanted to also mention that this book is part of what's called the Tiny Book series with One Idea Press. They are a small publisher outside of Pennsylvania. And because they're a small press, we had made the intentional decision that this book will not be available at Target, on Amazon, at Barnes & Noble. It is only through the publisher and then independent booksellers like Bookworks here. The reason we're doing that is because as a small press and the small publisher, we want to support and celebrate the independent publishers, the independent bookstores, and of course, the authors. So that's just a note on that. So you won't find it anywhere else but from the publisher. So. All right, so I'm actually going to put on my glasses. This is kind of new to have to wear glasses reading. So anyway, we're gonna go with that. Okay, I wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old. I wrote my first piece in kindergarten, a poem complete with an illustration. It was 3 couplets about a ball of bubblegum coming out of a gumball machine, me taking my first chew and how the flavors burst on my tongue. I thought that was really profound. Grape Hubba Bubba and watermelon Bubblicious were my inspiration. Over the years, I have continued to write. More poetry, some essays, some short stories, some professional pieces like newspaper articles, speeches, ghostwriting, written using a number of tools, mostly notebooks and pens, and being quite precious about them. I've been known to caress a Moleskine notebook or 2 in my day. I've had a brief tryst with fountain pens at one point too. In the early 2000s, I did what many other writers did. I got myself a MacBook because if it was good enough for Carrie Bradshaw and afforded her that apartment in New York City as well as all those designer shoes, well then a MacBook and nothing less was going to make my writer dreams come true. I knew when I walked out of that big blue box store with my first MacBook, it was on, that I was going to head home, write the first of many novels, and when Oprah called, I was going to be ready. And I had already picked out which clothes I'd wear on my book tour. I must confess, I didn't do a whole lot of writing on that MacBook, but you saw that coming, didn't you? I could possibly chalk up this lack of writing to a number of things. Online chat rooms, email, early internet community forums, just to name a few. But no matter the reason, I just didn't write. The next MacBook was going to be the magic bullet. I just knew it. No? Okay, well then the next one would be. Still no? Well, then really, the MacBook Air that came after that, well, that was going to launch my bestseller career for sure. Spoiler, it didn't. Also, trying to keep up with the latest and greatest version of that sleek, sexy laptop was exhausting. I would start to write, get one paragraph in, see the flashing cursor on the digital page in front of me, and begin finessing those 5 or 6 sentences instead of just writing more of them. Instead of giving myself more to work with, I fiddled around with the same 100 words over and over and over again. Eventually, I would close my computer, and when I'd opened it a few months later, serious about writing this time, there would be innumerable software updates needed, and the battery would be completely dead. So then, once said updates were made and the battery was alive and full, I no longer felt like writing. Those 100 words failed to multiply, and the cycle would repeat itself again and again. Then, in the spring of 2013, my husband and my son gave me a beautiful vintage Olympia typewriter. Seeing me gush over that little pink machine at the local shop when we'd been window shopping a few weeks earlier, my guys went back and got her for me. Not with the intention of me using her to actually write, but as a gorgeous little symbol of me, the writer. She looked really amazing on a shelf, and she sat there for nearly a decade, untouched, just like the MacBooks that came before her. Fast forward to the time in recent history when the world nearly shut down completely due to an infectious virus and everyone's keeping to themselves indoor for the most part. I started decluttering and getting rid of all the things in sight that didn't spark joy. Raise your hands if you did that too. I know I'm not alone here, no judgment. And then, there on the shelves was still my little pink typewriter. I took her down, noticed her ribbon was dry, her keys were sticking, and instantly knew she would be leaving my house. But not to the thrift store as a donation to my local typewriter shop here in Albuquerque. Yes, I was pleasantly surprised to find out there was even such a thing. When I walked into John Lewis Mechanical Antiques, it felt like I was going back into time, but without that fancy DeLorean. Vintage adding machines, phonograph players, and even a gumball machine peppered the showroom floor, which was mainly occupied by an assortment of obviously well-cared-for manual typewriters. I knew mine was going to be in good hands for the next few months because, believe it or not, John Lewis had such a backlog of business, it was going to take that long before he could tend to my Olympia. When I got the call that she was ready to be picked up, full of excitement, I wished I could drive that 88 miles per hour to get to her as quickly as possible, but I stayed a safe 35 as I went down Manal Boulevard. As I drove home with my typewriter, Louise, named for one of my favorite authors, I didn't know that soon I would write more than I'd ever written in all the years prior. Short stories, poems, essays, journal entries, snail mail letters, and then some were about to be born. The key, for me, was writing distraction-free, on something simple, something with one purpose. To say a typewriter changed my writing life seems hyperbolic, I know, and yet it's true. I hope this book helps you find your Louise and write more than ever too. Guess a shiny Carrie Bradshaw MacBook. It wasn't actually what I needed because I'm more of a Charlotte anyway. All right. So, 11 reasons to use a typewriter. Number 1, no distractions, no internet, no notifications, no unexpected noises. Number 2, no cords. A manual typewriter is always charged and ready to go. You eventually need to swap out a fresh ribbon, but one well-inked ribbon far outlasts the average daily laptop or smartphone charge. 3, no software updates needed. A typewriter's operating system is never outdated. 4, instant printing. No need to figure out how printer drivers work. You type a word on the page and it appears on paper. Magic. 5, tactile and sensory delight. Tapping a typewriter key just hits different than it does on a computer keyboard. Your fingers get massaged by the keys and the ding of the bell as you finish the line. Hello, sweet dopamine hit. And the clickety clack of the type slugs as they hit the platen. Swoon. 6, no hard drive or USB needed. Your writing is saved automatically. A typewriter will never crash. If you throw it out of the window of a speeding car, then that's a slightly different story. Google Royal Road Test, and you'll see what I mean. 7, no editing or deleting. This is a big one. This is perhaps one of the biggest advantages of using a typewriter. I'm here to sing the praises of not being able to hit the backspace key and instantly erase a typo or a thought. Writing on a typewriter allows you to get into the flow. Write a sentence and feel like it's not quite right? Don't grab the correction tape. This is all about the first draft. Write now, edit later, get the words on the page. Number 8, built to last forever. With proper care, your machines will outlive you. This is true. Typewriters weren't designed to be used for a year or to be traded in or discarded for the latest model. One solid typewriter will last a lifetime, and what an environmental gift that is. 9, single purpose. A typewriter does one thing and it does it well. 10, interesting history. Each one has seen some things and definitely has unique stories to tell. And 11, they're just plain fun. So, with that, skipping ahead in the book, there's lots of juicy information in here, but I'm getting to the last part that I'm going to read you, and it's more about writing. And it's the end, but also the very beginning. So, for all the writers in the room, the aspiring writers, and maybe this will inspire you to write. 2 things I want you to remember. 1, writing is hard. 2, you are writing a first draft. Now, I know not everyone agrees that writing is hard. There are a handful of writers I've encountered over the years who vehemently refute this statement. I'm going to go out on a limb here, though. If you're reading this book, there's a good chance that when you hear other writers proclaim that putting words on the page is fun, easy, and a joy, well, that makes you wonder if you're a real writer. For you, maybe writing isn't one of those things. In fact, writing is scary, hard, and feels impossible most of the time, especially when you're working on the first draft. It's okay to feel like writing is hard. It won't always feel hard, but a lot of the time it will. And I won't sugarcoat or gloss over the very real emotion you have. to make you feel like something is wrong if your fingers aren't flying across the keyboard with keys snapping and words quickly appearing on the page effortlessly like magic. I'm not going to do that to you. It's been done to me, and I've resented it. Being told that writing should come easily to me made me feel like I wasn't a writer, that I wasn't a real writer. You are real. You're showing up to write. And don't look at a first draft with expectations of perfection, that the first draft needs to be exactly what you put into the world. If putting into the world is even one of your goals at all, because it certainly doesn't have to be. What you are doing here is writing a first draft. And honestly, most first drafts are a mess. Dare I say shitty even. Thank you, Anne Lamott. And that is okay. It's more than okay. It's likely and it's true. And it's amazing because it's a starting place. Get the words on the page, allow them to warm up and be imperfect. You can give them a glow up in the revision stage. Right now, though, this is a first draft. This is the stage of getting your words down. I promise you there will be so many nuggets of gold that will eventually shine once you polish them for your final manuscript. But polishing isn't what we're doing right now. In this moment, you're allowing yourself to have some fun, to enjoy the process, to meet your characters, to shape the topic you've researched, to show up to the page and let what excited you at the very beginning of your project take the wheel and drive. But this draft is driving with your learner's permit. One day you'll ace the exam and get the shiny ID with your face on it, but today is not that day. You get to drive down bumpy roads and take wrong turns. You get to leave the maps at home and find your own way. It's okay to get lost. It's okay if it doesn't feel hard for someone else, that's okay too, because that's their experience. But this isn't everyone else's first draft. It's yours. And I promise you that if it feels hard, you're in good company, because there are many writers who feel just like you. It is also possible that you might start writing, get into a flow state, and have an amazing writing session. Afterward, you feel fantastic and you can't wait to write again. And then you don't show up for the next scheduled writing date you've promised for yourself, or the next one after that. A few days go by, maybe a few weeks, possibly months. Imposter syndrome may be settling in. How could this be happening? That last session felt so good. You did so well. You got into the flow, for goodness sake. But it can be common for a writer's high, similar to that of a runner's high, all those feel-good energies flowing through your body, to be followed by a fair amount of avoidance, and what's more, self-doubt. You may wonder why anyone will want to read what you've written, think that you're not a real writer. Friendly reminder that if you're writing, you are indeed a writer. That what you already written should be crumbled up and tossed directly into the trash, that you're kidding yourself and you should just quit right now. Put your typewriter up for sale and never speak of this silly writing attempt ever again. To all of which I simply say, no. That's right, no to all of it. You've come this far and you can keep going. Do not give up now. And for the love of all that is good in the world, like stationery supplies, kitten kisses, and Sunday brunch with your besties, do not go back and read any pages of your first draft until it's complete. I repeat, do not go back and read any pages of your first draft until it's complete. You can longingly look at the stack of pages, whether it's 100 pages tall or 2, but now is not the time to review them. Now is the time to sit back in front of your typewriter and to keep writing. There will be plenty of time to review your work and revise it later. Right now is time for writing your first draft. No one will write it quite the way you will. You're a writer. You are no imposter. And how do I know this? How can I say this with the fullest of confidence? Because imposters don't do the work. You're writing. You are a writer. It all starts with the first draft. Yeah, if anybody has any questions about the writing process or about the typewriters in general. Within the book, I do talk about how to pick your typewriter, much like picking your wand if you were, if you're a fan, because they all are so very different, or about writing process. So I'm up for any questions that you may have. Yes?
Hey, Roz.
Hi.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
My favorite thing about using a typewriter is I write a lot of letters.
Yeah.
And I am in love with stationery, because when I was young, that was the gift every female got on their birthday, was a stationery box or a pen set. So, and because stationery tends to be odd sizes, it's so easy with a typewriter. I don't even know how you would do that with a computer. Maybe there's a way to say this is whatever size. But
sure.
I just love that I can just, and then all the letters I write, I always do the address labels on my typewriter just because it looks so nice.
Oh yeah,
So-
sure. No, that's a great tip. Like I'm a stationery junkie myself. I remember getting my first Hello Kitty stationery, and I actually still have some paper. And it's true. I mean, things can fit in a typewriter that you can't necessarily, again, don't have to worry about feeding into this printer, this pesky printer. So, yeah, yes,
In the early days when there was handwriting or typewriting,
sure.
there was a lot of talk about it's better to write by hand because there's sort of this flow from
Sure.
your brain to your arm, and people said if you type, you're not getting that same thing. And what about that connection between the brain and this? And I can understand about the computer being a distraction because, yeah, it definitely is.
There's been studies done that writing by hand, there's just this different connection. It slows you down. And that's why they're like, if you type, especially we're talking about a computer keyboard, that it's not the same, that you're going to lose some of that. And there's some truth to that. And also, we're in a different generation, and they have grown up at a keyboard. My son, he has, been typing on a keyboard since, basically when he could walk. So with that, I kind of find typewriters to be the middle ground. And that's personally for me because people can really get speedy on a computer keyboard. The electric typewriters are much like that too. If you're looking for something a similar feel, that would be an electric typewriter. But you'll notice, and please do play around with these afterwards, you'll notice there's a different feel. Especially if you're new to a typewriter, you'll notice you're gonna just slow down naturally because you just kind of have to. And some people enjoy that too. Because you can't easily go back, sometimes people will be more intentional when they sit down to write and think about it before they just jam on out. But even if you just jam on out, that's okay too, because you can always go back. So to answer your question, I think that whatever gets someone writing, that's what they should be using. If it's handwriting, do it. And if it is the computer keyboard, I'm not going to say don't do it. I love the typewriter, and I think it's the best for certain reasons. But if you want to write, just use whatever you want to write with. Yeah. Yes. Hi.
Has using a typewriter for your writing influenced like the way you write it or change the way you write? And if that's the case, in what ways?
Thank you. That's a great question. So it has. Actually, in my personal collection, I have about 13 typewriters that I actually use all the time. The way that I use them a little differently, especially when I'm writing fiction, if it's a conversation, for example, I will have 2 separate typewriters. And so as the dialogue is going, I will go back and forth to each of them. And that can be a little, when I'm putting things together, but it's because they all have different personalities and different feel to them. So that's my writing process when I'm doing fiction. I do that often. But because they all have personalities to me too, and I name them, it's like, what am I working on right now? If I'm going to write a letter, I will pick Louise. If I'm going to work on something that's a little more hefty, then I will get out Allie. But it has changed my process in that, like the main thing and what the book is mainly about is that it's a distraction-free way. And when I am typing and I make a mistake, I just can't erase it and I keep going. So I'm actually writing more pages because I'm not worried about all this massaging and deleting. Thank you.
Was there a warm-up period, like when you were just kind of getting familiar with working on a typewriter, or was it like sort of a love at first sight or first touch kind of thing, or did it change depending on your machine?
When I brought this one home after it was serviced, it was fun just to play with it and see like, oh wow, because this one has a unique. It's script, it's cursive. So different typewriters will have different typefaces as well. Some will be smaller, bigger, cursive, italics. So I thought that was cool. What happened to me afterwards, though, was once I had that, I thought that was fun. Then I was visiting my in-laws in Colorado, and we went to a thrift store, and I saw this other typewriter. And the next thing you know, I come home, and I find this typewriter and this typewriter, and I'm like gathering them all up like orphans all over town. And I'm like, I want them all. So that was a lot of fun, and it can be fun to start collecting them. As a writer, you're like, oh, this is so cool. And I would caution you not to do that. If you want it as a writing tool, seriously, if you want it as a writing tool, have 1, 2, 3. There can be backups if you want to do different things. But what happens is, just remember, as a writer, you want to write, not to collect, right? So that's kind of how the journey went. I know. Yes.
How has your writing process changed? Aside from like the distraction-free stuff, but just over the many years, I mean, since you were 5, how has that changed for you?
Oh my goodness. It's changed so much. And I think that I've had different points in my life where I wasn't writing at all. And quite honestly, that was because of comparison, of worrying about somebody else in a class when I was in college. In my dorm room, there was somebody, she was a journalism major. There was already a writer there. I'm not the writer anymore. What am I going to be? I pick something else. And then I would get encouragement, and then I would pick it up again. And then I had a job as a journalist when I was in Cincinnati, and then writing became my job. And then it wasn't fun anymore because I was writing about other people's lives and I wasn't living my own life. Writing can be so many different things because there's so many different ways you can write, things you can write about, whether it's professionally or personally. And I kind of done so many things. I've been a speechwriter. I've done ghostwriting for different books. But my process, if we're talking process and how that's changed, that's a tough one too, because I think it changes. Honestly, my process will change almost every season. I get a different feeling based on what's happening and how my body is like, I'm getting up early, I got more energy and I'm doing different things. I'm not the type of writer who writes every day. I know that's something that is very well known. People say you have to write every day if you're a real writer. I don't think so. What I do think is important is to write consistently. And, that is showing up, and whatever consistently means for you. For some people, that is once a week. For some people, that is twice a month. Some people, it's twice a day. It's setting whatever feels right for you, but showing up consistently does matter. I'm one of those people that is a perfectionist in how I want things to look. So that was an adjustment using a typewriter because I get going and I make a mistake. And at first I was taking it out and I was starting over. And so it actually has loosened me up as far as just going into the flow of it, not worrying too much. And again, this is what I want to focus on is a first draft of something. If you have that, just let it go, let it happen, let the mistakes happen, because it's going to be imperfect, and let it be imperfect. And also what you spoke to with the typewriter and the feel of it. So if anybody is considering getting a typewriter for yourself to write, just because one is my favorite typewriter doesn't mean that's going to be your favorite typewriter. There are some very expensive typewriters. There's a Hermes over there, and if you're in the typewriter community, oh my goodness, do you want a Hermes? It's like the one to have. And I've had one, and I did not like it, and I sold it. So it's just whatever fits for you is what you want to look for, and just remember it's very personal. Yes.
Did you have a lot of freedom and say in the way that your book looked with One Press?
Yes. So I did. One Idea Press, they're so lovely. And they're so wonderful in that they, this is what they do. So many writing books that have a typewriter on the front of it. And they're not about using a typewriter. It's just that symbol. Just first of all, it's going to stand out if there's not a typewriter on it. But to make it special, what they did, this part of the book is actually one of my typewriters. So I typed it out and I sent it to the designer, and then she made that be there. So it's actually a little bit more special. I had so much say in how it was going to look. So, yes.
I've noticed in your work that you use the red typeface.
Yeah.
In a unique way. How did you come upon that? What does that mean to you?
Oh, sure. So I do, often when I write poetry, I will, so on a typewriter, you can see with the ribbon, and not all typewriters are going to have the capability to use the black and red, but when you do, you can switch back and forth, and people will use those for colors for different reasons. I usually use it to have a word stand out for a certain emphasis in a piece, in a finished piece. That's why I do it. Could you catch on to how to use a typewriter? Again. I learned in high school, and then I've been using computers for the last few decades. It is a bit of a learning curve, unless you go with an electric one, which is kind of like butter. It's very similar to the computer keyboard. It's going to be an adjustment. My pinkies at first were like, what are you doing? We're not doing that. But now they're pretty able to do it. And the speed with which I type is faster now that I've been doing it for a while, but it was like plunking away at first. Yeah. And after you have done your first draft and you've given it a pass over or two, where you're asking where would it go next. So if we're talking about here in town, there are writers groups that you can find. There's at the different libraries. I know for like Cherry Hills has one. I'm going to be doing a workshop at one of theirs for their writers. So there's writers groups locally, and that can be a great thing to do. I know that there are several groups. However, though, as I say that, it's important to remember, especially if this is a piece that is personal to you or that is still in those very baby stages of a book, to be very careful who you let read it. Feedback and critique is an art. It just is. And it's not taught in school how to critique somebody's writing. Somebody thinks that feedback is just like, I don't like this, you need to change this, you need to do that. That's not, it's not constructive, it's not helpful. So you do want to find somebody who has done this before, who is well-versed in how to give feedback, because if you don't, you could really just put it in a drawer and not even want to touch it again. There's book coaches that you can get feedback from. So again, like I was mentioning, if you really want somebody who's been trained in how to critique, that would be an avenue. So there are courses like that. Again, I love that one because I work on that one, but there's plenty of others too.
So you've done your drafts, do you scan them into
Yes.
your computer then? So then you can do your editing there?
Yes.
And the other question is, do you ever you write letters to people and put them in envelopes and mail them to people?
I do. So yeah, the second one, I have a stack of letters right now to pen pals that I need to get back to. But there are so many people who still enjoy doing that, and it's a lot of fun. And as far as scanning them in, so this, because I'm in my little analog world and I love typewriting, I love handwriting, again, that's more my lane. And so as I was working on my book, I was doing interviews. So there's interviews with people who, typewriter people in the world. And I was listening to them and I was trying to transcribe them. And so that was working for a little bit. And then I was actually having periods where I was like typing things out and I was going. And then I was like, okay, but now I have to revise it. So, okay. And then I sat down and I started to then type it into the computer. And then I actually don't remember which one, if it was my husband or my son, that was like, you could just take a picture of that. Yeah. And that's all you need to do. And it sounds crazy, but there's so many, that was so simple, and it makes it even easier then to do, right? Because you can still then type, get all those things out, take a picture of it, boom, put it, it's in a Google Doc for you. And then you can do revision. So, because I have heard that, well, if I type all this stuff up, then what am I going to do next? I don't have to retype it. You don't have to. And some people choose to. I actually know writers who choose to, because then they are engrossed in the work again, and so start to do some revision as they're moving into that.
I really have noticed, maybe since I know you, that there are typewriters all the time on TV that I used to see, in interview shows, they'll be in the background, or they'll just be there. So I wonder if you see a sort of a trend toward that, or towards the popularity of what you're doing.
Honestly, has been a resurgence in typewriters, especially since COVID. Even in the 2.5 years that I've been collecting, I could go to a thrift store here in Albuquerque and pick one up for $25. That same typewriter now, honestly, would be over $200. So it's just kind of where they are. You can get a deal, and I write about this too, and I'm happy to talk more about it, but you have to decide when you're getting your typewriter, do you want to write on it or do you want to learn how to repair it? Because it's totally different things. And people are like, yeah, but if I have a typewriter, I need to know how to repair it. What I liken it to is a baker or somebody who cooks a lot doesn't know necessarily how to repair a blender if that breaks down, or how to do something with the oven. So it's a tool. You don't necessarily have to know the ins and outs of it. So I recommend getting one that is ready to go and is working, because it's to write, but it can be fun to play with them too. But that's my take on that. Yes.
There's a local typewriter group.
Yes, there is. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. I meant to say thank you too. So there is the A.B. QWERTY Typewriter Society. They are who supplied the typewriters tonight, and I am part of that. And we're a fun group. We get together. There are what we call type-ins a couple of times a year. This is Joe. He's one of the founders of the Typewriter Society. So yes, if you are interested in just learning more or playing around with more typewriters, I can give you information on that. Yeah, and it's fun to play around with different typewriters and talk shop and talk writing. So great. Thank you so much, everybody. Really, thank you.
Well, it was a great turnout for the book reading of Woz's. I'm really thankful that we were able to show up and support her and have the typewriters available for everybody. What a great event it was. Congrats to Woz again for her book and the book signing. And as always, we wish you the very best in your creative endeavors. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye for now.